Well, hi everyone. Welcome to The Grid Live. I am not Scott or Matt or RC or Pete, if you notice. I'm Corey Barker, and I have taken over the show because everybody is at Photo Plus Expo in New York City. So I'm filling in. So if you happen to be at Photo Plus this week, you want to stop by the booth. It's booth number 473, the KelbyOne booth, and say hi to the gang because Scott, Matt, RC, Joe McNally, Jay Maisel, Rick Salmon, Tamara Lackey, and a lot more will be there teaching at the booth. Now, we are here back in the studio. I'm Corey Barker, and I have a special guest in the studio today. We have a very special DSLR filmmaker, Barry Andersson. Barry, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great.
Now, Barry is joining us here at KelbyOne headquarters. He's doing some classes for KelbyOne, but we also wanted to have him on the show today to discuss our topic today, which is DSLR filmmaking. So we're going to be getting into that in just a little bit, but I want to talk about something else that we're very excited about here at KelbyOne, and that is this brand new publication right here. Everybody knows Jay Maisel. It's one of the most phenomenal photographers out there. This is his first book, and it is now available for pre-order here at KelbyOne.com. Check it out. Jay Maisel, Light, Gesture, and Color. This guy is a phenomenal photographer. He has been around forever. He's been a photographer since what, the 60s? Or 60s?
I don't know if he wants you to say that.
No, I don't know.
Since the early 80s.
Yeah.
I think that's what
he's only been at it for about 10 years.
Yeah.
No, but this is a phenomenal book. You would definitely want to, there you go. So there you can see the site right there. You can go, I will.
Okay.
So you can go and check out the site and see it. But look, if you just look, when it comes back, it's just a massive collection of some of his best photography out there. I mean, this man is a phenomenal, and it's all about what the cover says: light, gesture, and color. So you really want to check this book out. It's brand new, hot off the presses. They just got these in this week, so you can definitely check this out and pre-order it, as I said, there at KelbyOne.com. You can actually download a sample chapter as well, right? You can actually download a sample chapter. It's at, where is that site? It's right there. There it is, KelbyOne.com/J. Now, will we be giving away a copy of the book? Can we give away a copy of the book on the show here? Yeah, we'll give away one. Yeah, we're going to give away one copy of the book here on the show later today, so be sure to check that out. So, all right, where are we? Are we on to a break? No, we're not. We're going to talk. All right, so let's start talking about our topic, which is DSLR filmmaking. Now, Barry, you have got a book as well. So can you kind of just introduce us to who you are and what you do as far as that goes?
Sure. Well, I co-authored the DSLR Filmmaker's Handbook. My background is I'm a working cinematographer director. I've been doing this now for since the early 80s as well. I'm not quite as old as Jay, but my client list includes everyone from ESPN to the Discovery Channel. You kind of name most of the major sports franchises. I've done work with them. You know, a lot of corporations. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades, and kind of what I started doing is that my background, as I started on 35mm motion picture film, I was a snob and I hated video, and so I very much had a bad decade in the 90s with the early HD cameras, and then when the DSLR cameras came out, it was the first merging creatively of kind of my filmmaking background with this HD video. We got to use the same lenses. It was just a body and a lens, and I got to go back and create, and it kind of reignited my passion for doing what I'm doing. And so I was an early adopter. I have a bunch of friends out in LA, so I was out in all the major color suites and post houses going through and putting it through its early paces, and I realized that, hey, you know, this is going to be here to stay, and so I jumped on early, and here I am 6.5 years later riding the wave. I
just have to say, and I kind of commented on this before, that kind of explains why you're clinging to the filmmaker's title here.
I am.
We all know there's actually no film involved in DSLR filmmaking, but I get what you're saying. You know, video, you know, there's a stigma that when video started out, you know, it has a quality that people just didn't really like versus film.
Well, it wasn't a stigma. It was just, it was fact. I mean, when you looked at early HD cameras, it was overly sharp. The colors were weird. Kind of contrast was off. You never really got the feeling that you were kind of that soft, kind of organic feel that you got with film. And just the way that film absorbed light and how the image was actually produced on that camera was just different. And anybody who's from a traditional video background, they know that you usually bought a camera and a lens was attached to it and you never touched it. So they didn't understand kind of the creative tools and using lenses to force perspective and stuff like that. So it really got back to kind of opening it up to everybody and saying, hey, let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to creativity. And even though there were limitations with the cameras, it didn't matter because we were actually go back and able to kind of, play in the sandbox again. New toys.
All right. So we're going to be getting into this subject a little bit deeper a little bit. So we are, in fact, going to be giving away Barry's book a little bit later as well. We've got a lot of books we're going to be giving away today. So we've got Jay's book, we've got Barry's book, and hey, look, we've got my book too here. So, all right. So before we do that, also want to talk about a new course. There's actually a switch course coming up later. I'm reading the prompter. It's like, but we have a course. It's making the switch from Aperture to Lightroom. Our very own Matt Klaskowski has produced this course. So if you are an Aperture user and are ready to make the switch to Lightroom, we of course have that course ready for you here at KelbyOne. So be sure to check that out. Now we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking with Barry some more about DSLR filmmaking, and we're going to be taking some questions from you. So stay with us. We will be right back right here on the grid.
Hey Corey, we're going to that new pizza place across the street after work. You in?
I really wish I could, man. I'm under deadline with this book. I gotta get it done.
You're a machine, Corey. You're a machine!
Well, you have no idea.
From the robotic compositing mind of Corey Barker, learn step-by-step Photoshop tricks, type effects, extracting, textures, Hollywood effects, and really badass 3D. Photoshop Down and Dirty Tricks for Designers, Volume 2. Your mind will be composited away.
Well, hi everyone. We are back here on the grid with Barry Andersson, famed DSLR filmmaker. Is that right? Famed?
I'll take it.
We'll go with
I'll
that,
take
of course. Now, I do have to comment. Somebody had commented a moment ago, and Brandon put it up there, that somebody really liked your hair.
Well, I guess I'll say thank you.
Yes, they enjoy it. So, what are we going to talk about now? We're going to talk about, the topic is, of course, DSLR filmmaking. Now, when you're talking about DSLR, we're talking about photography. Now, one of the things we had talked about was photographers wanting to make that transition from photography to video, to DSLR filmmaking, and you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to insert something we didn't talk about before. Back in 2008, I call it the death of graphic designers. And I think some of your audience might, have come from that sort of background in more the graphical space as opposed to photography space. And you used to have these different trades. You had a Photoshop artist, you had a graphic designer, you had all these different elements. You had an illustrator, and kind of, I feel like in 2008, what used to be considered a graphic designer died, and then you just absorbed designer. And so all companies started to force everything. You guys, you can do web, you can do print, you can do photo, you can do video, and it was kind of became that. And so what used to be a specialized field became much more of a, okay, we got to do everything. And I think we're at the very inception of that here with the photography market. That it used to be, people had professional photographers, then they came out with stock photos, and it's kind of been morphing, and now you got mobile phones that are coming in the trick, now you have video. And so I kind of think that there's a general confusion that's out there right now, and I think people don't know what to think. And I think we can take some cues from the graphic design, knowing that it's all going to converge together, which either can be really exciting or really depressing, or maybe a mix of both. So I think what we were talking about before is that photographers, they'll come up to me and ask, hey, I want to get started in video. And there's a lot of tools that photographers have that is very applicable to video, but then there's a lot of things that they just haven't before. If you're used to taking certain lenses and capturing an image, it looks different when you actually add motion to it. So it doesn't mean that it always translates 100%. You know, you're in the ballpark. But I think what photographers do is I think sometimes mistakenly they go, hey, I'll just add on my little business card or my website, hey, I shoot video, and now I can get more work. And the answer is yes, you can. But what you have to realize is that more work doesn't always come with more money. So a lot of photographer friends I have, you know, they're used to getting paid X amount per day, and they have X amount of hours they work. When they add video, oftentimes it's same amount of money, but you have twice, if not 3 times the amount of work, and you have to go out and buy 2 to 3 times as much equipment. So, you know, it is a business decision, but you can't just kind of run to it saying, hey, just because my camera shoots it, I can therefore make extra money and not really kind of invest my time and expertise. So I think it's kind of a catch-22.
It's interesting. I mean, yeah, coming from a graphic design background myself, and I agree with you what you say, because I've actually been using Photoshop since version 2. So one thing I tell people is when they're starting to learn Photoshop is it's like, I want to do this, and it's like the best thing you can do is master everything. You know, the thing about Photoshop is that it does so many things. It does video, it does illustration, it does graphic design, it does photography and all these things. And there's people that are experts in certain aspects of that. But I tell people, master all of those things, because it's only going to make you marketable if you know more and you're able to do more with it.
I would kind of agree with you that I think that that's a necessity to be employable. You have to have a cross.
And that's why, that's
but
my point.
I think the word mastery is confusing, because I think that's where people get frustrated, because I think people go out there and they try to learn all of this and they try to be as competent as they are in all of it as they used to be in 1 or 2 subjects, and they can't. And so they kind of feel like everyone else out there has somehow, you know, figured out this magical formula that gives them this, and it's not. Everybody's struggling with that. You're becoming that, you know, I'm a jack of many trades, but master of none. That's becoming the norm. So I think it's critical to have a broad base of skill sets, but I don't want to give off the wrong opinion that you can really master that many.
Yeah, well, I agree. Master's probably a poor choice.
But I just think it's good for people to know, because a lot of people come to me and they kind of feel like they're a failure because they go, hey, I can't, you know, how do you do it? And I'm like, well, you kind of don't. You know, you find your couple specialties where you master in, you add those other skill sets, and then you can go out and get work. But it's definitely, you know, I just feel that a lot of people get depressed. And I don't want people being depressed. I want them to be realistic. But yes, I agree with you.
All right, let's go to the comments here. We've got, what is that, Siam. I'm going to go with that.
All right.
Is there a best all-around lens to use for filming, especially on a glide cam?
Well, the answer, I guess, is twofold. You could talk about both the brands of lenses and also the focal length. So by and large, anytime you're using any sort of stabilizer, a glide cam, steady cam, the wider angle the lens, the less you're going to pick up any of the extra nonsense in moving. So I usually am somewhere, my favorite wide angle lens is my 21 millimeter. I use both Zeiss lenses, I use Leica lenses, I use Canon sometimes. So to me, it's more in that one, not less about the brand, but it is about the focal length. So I'd say somewhere, you know, 28 millimeters or wider would be my recommendation for him.
And we got another question. Lee Calkins asks, what kind of stabilizer do you use? It seems a pretty...
That's a broad one.
Broad one, but...
So I use a little bit of both. So I have a Steadicam flyer rig that I use as, you know, the big workhorse if I'm going to go out and do it. I have a little handheld kind of... I don't even know what brand it is, but it's kind of almost like this makeshift. It's kind of like a glide cam. It's just kind of a post. I think it's from Cobra Crane makes it. And I'm on the fence right now with picking up one of these gyro stabilizer units, and I'm a fan of the Defy units that are out there, but I haven't yet pulled the trigger on myself, so if I need to, I'll rent those.
Now, I'm sure people also want to know, what body do you use? You Canon shooter?
I'm a Canon shooter. 5D Mark III is the camera that has got me the most amount of work in the history of my career, because it's seemingly... You know, it's in the last probably 12 months, maybe 18 months, it's kind of become, there's been such a proliferation, is that the way you say it?
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. I speak English. And there's been so many cameras that hit the market that people now keep thinking that, have they come out with the perfect camera yet? And the answer is no. There's not a perfect camera. The closest, in my opinion, in the space that we're in is still the Canon 5D Mark III.
All right, let's take one more question before we take a quick break. Alexandra asked, when shooting with a DSLR, if moving around, how do you refocus?
Well, there's two ways you can handle that. The Canon 70D with the new Canon lenses, you can actually do autofocus, where in the back of the LCD you can actually just tap the faces and the camera will do the work for you. So that's a little bit more in the old traditional kind of autofocus world where it's not going in and out, but you have some control. But again, if you use a wide-angle lens and you're not shooting wide open, you can actually do pretty well getting home videos or kind of that run and gun style and not have too much of a problem. So if you stay wide and don't stop all the way down or open all the way up, that will really help you a lot.
All right. All right, and I mentioned earlier, we talked about a new course talking about switching from Aperture to Lightroom. I wanted to mention where you could find out more about that. You can simply go to KelbyOne.com/switch. I was about to say /witch. It's Halloween, whatever.
It's the right time of year for that one.
KelbyOne.com/switch. Check out that course by our own Matt Klaskowski. We are going to take another quick break right here on the grid. We'll be right back with Barry Andersson here on the grid.
What kind of a person could stand shoulder to shoulder with soldiers on enemy soil and reach for a camera when they reach for a gun? What kind of a person can hold a camera to their eye and press the shutter button in a place where violence and crime is so rampant, each frame they take could be their last? Why would anyone choose to spend 4 years in the Scandinavian tundra just to tell a photographic story that's never been told before? Danger, extreme conditions, and tough issues might be enough to scare off most photographers. Now, meet the unstoppable women who run in when others run away, who press on despite overwhelming odds, whose images tell amazing stories. In a brand new series you'll see only here on KelbyOne, these ladies share their stories of dedication, loss, and how they faced fear head on, camera at the ready. These are trailblazers, powerful women of photography. It's a series you don't want to miss right here on KelbyOne.
Well, hi everyone, we are back here on the grid. Now, we are, of course, talking DSLR filmmaking. Now, one of the things we wanted to talk about, and I know this is a question in a lot of people's minds, is audio. Obviously, if you got the camera, you can get the image, you know, and do what you need to, but I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about audio. Do you record audio right to the camera, or what are the other options involved there?
Well, that's actually why you guys brought me here, is I'm actually doing 2 courses, both on capturing audio and also dealing with it in post. So I'll give a little bit of a teaser, but I actually do both. I actually record directly to the camera as well as use external devices. And you know, it's one of those things where, you know, I like to refer to DSLR cameras, they're just technology. So the kind of the joke when I'm doing training or at a trade show, I'll ask people, how many people have a camera or a cell phone that's, you know, 3 or 4 years old? And there's usually like one embarrassed person that raises their hand and says me, and they somehow feel inferior. But with cell phones, they understand it keeps changing. But for some reason with cameras, people think that, you know, oh, I heard that, you know, a couple years ago, so therefore it's still true. And you're like, no. Things are constantly moving. So every time they come out with something new, it improves upon the problems that were there before. So the audio inputs and capabilities of the newer cameras are better than the older ones. They're not always perfect, but there are tricks that you can use to actually get good audio inside the camera, and there are times where recording outside of the camera is a better option as well. So it's kind of a little bit of both.
All right, so why don't we go to a question? I see an interesting one right there. Brando?
Marlon, yes.
Is Marlon?
Yep, Marlon's joining us from
Yes,
from the other world.
do you shoot to cards or external device? What is your preference?
Okay, man, I feel like it depends kind of guide today. So I mostly shoot to cards. For my CF cards, I like SanDisk and Lexar. Those are the 2 brands that I use. I tend not to use off-brand CF cards just because that's the most important part, is I'm spending all the money to capture the images that I don't want a card that's kind of a second tier or the manufacturing is not up to par. I do use external devices. It's not my preference because I don't like, part of the joy for me of shooting is when things are small and mobile. So the more things I kind of bolt on, the bigger it gets, it kind of makes me more stationary. So the external device I use, for instance, some cameras I need to be able to shoot 4K, and I can only bring a signal out and bring in an external recorder. Sometimes there's a reason where I'm using the external recorder because I'm shooting in a longer environment where inside the camera I get topped out at 30 minutes and I need to shoot longer than that, so I'll use the external device. So the external device I use for specialty purposes, but by and large I shoot to cards, and the cards that I like are SanDisk and Lexar.
All right, Michael Lloyd asks, what's your process for storyboarding? I guess the first question is, do you storyboard, and what's your process?
Well, wherever I can, storyboarding I love to do. But I'll answer the question, then I'll kind of talk a little bit more about a trend in the business, if you want to say.
Okay.
Storyboarding, for those that aren't aware, it's basically you create drawings or some sort of a pre-visualization of what you're going to shoot, so that you know kind of which angle you're coming from and all that. And so my process is, I have a couple friends that I've worked with in the past that are artists that do storyboarding, both in LA and the Midwest and East Coast. I have them kind of spread out. So if I have extra money and I have the time, I will do that. If you ever have the misfortune of seeing my drawings, it's quite atrocious. So I can communicate via stick figures, but it's not great. So if I'm forced doing it on my own, a lot of times what I'll do is take screenshots from the web, either from videos or pictures, and I'll use it as a representation. Here's about the framing I want, or this is an element of the camera motion that I would like to duplicate. So I can improve the language with the rest of the crew. But by and large, I'd say that that's probably less than 5% of my productions. I get the chance to do that. And I think that's where I want to segue into a broader issue with the industry is, I have, quote unquote, the name clients. I have people that are, the cream of the crop. And what I've noticed, that people always used to kind of go, and people are always like, oh, you worked for ESPN, or you worked for this person, you worked for that person, and what was that like? And I'm like, well, by and large, I actually prefer the clients you've never heard of. Those are my favorite, because it's kind of that they come to me, I'm the expert, they trust me, and they're valuing what I do. A lot of these bigger companies, because they have a name, it's just a meat market. They just want to, your rate goes down, your work environment goes down, your hours go down.
You say it's a very corporate type thing? Or?
Yeah, everything. Like you go in there and they know that they can get someone to work, so they don't really think of it as an artist, they just think of it as plugging a hole. So if they can get anybody, because they know that everybody wants to work with them. So I think by and large, the conditions for shooting, we used to have a crew, now we're down to 1, 2, 3 people as opposed to 7 or 10. So the idea of having someone that you could actually pay to do a storyboard, they don't always pay to have an audio person. I was on a job where the president of the company picked up the recorder and says, how do I use this? I'm your audio guy today. And I'm just like, oh man, this isn't going well. But again, he was footing the bill, and he just figured, how hard can audio be? And luckily they hired me so I could teach him real quick and make sure that it didn't go wrong. But I think that you don't have that option all the time anymore.
Very interesting. All right. Let's take one more question, and I have an interesting topic I want to talk about, something we talked about earlier. Is that Cyan again? It was Siam earlier. Is it Cyan this time? What's the best budget sound recording device to use with a 5D Mark III? He says, I have a Zoom H1, but syncing up can be difficult sometimes unless there is good software to help with that.
Correct. So budget's hard in this, because for some people, $200, $300, $400 is budget. Other people are like, I want it for $100 or less.
Right.
So it's kind of across the board. My preference is, if I'm just doing interviews and I just have 1 or 2 people that I'm miking up, I prefer to buy an external preamp and bring it directly into the camera. So I use both JuiceLink products and BeachTech. You can get their cheaper models, I think, for around $200 and change. And you can just go ahead and bring a signal in, bring it directly into your camera. And I much prefer that, because then I don't have to deal with the syncing in post, the time, the software, and just the hassles of doing that. So that would be my recommendation. I don't know if that fits the budget category, but that's what I'm gonna stick with that, Alex.
Stick with that. Okay. Right. So we've talked a lot about stuff on the front end of the DSLR filmmaking process, but what about the back end, your post-processing? What software do you use for your editing?
So I actually use, as I say, all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I use Premiere Pro, and you might say, which version of Premiere Pro? And that just is all up to Adobe, because now that I'm on the cloud, I think I have like 5 versions on my computer. It's I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I have a new one. Great. So I use Adobe Premiere Pro. I have Final Cut 10, but I would not say I'm using it very often because it's still scary to me. I do use Avid Media Composer as I would have it, and I still use Final Cut 7 because I'd still say probably a good 30–40% of my clients still are in Final Cut 7. So I'm still kind of a multi-purpose, jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah, and there's a good chance that a lot of our viewers have Creative Cloud's accounts, so everybody has access to Premiere Pro and, of course, After Effects and those things like that. So everybody has. And what are you using any of the Adobe audio?
I actually use Audition. Audition is a killer product, and some of the audio is weird because I feel like audio people, I always liken them to math people. It's like they're a different breed. Their brains work a different way. They're very talented, but it's kind of like they can't relate to normal people. So now it's like normal people are invading the audio world, and audio people are constantly horrified when they see like what I'm doing or other people are doing. They're like, that's improper, and they're freaking out. And if you go into a program like Audition, what's great is they now, an audio person will go in and they'll grab the equalizer and they'll go into all the menus and they start adjusting everything. And I see, buttons upon buttons upon buttons. I'm like, I don't know what to do. And Adobe went in and said, you know what? We know that they're going to do it with a voice, so we're going to do a check button for enhance for voice. And then it's going to go through and kind of do some of that legwork for you. So Adobe's done a really good job of taking a product that's really good for professionals and giving it so it's usable for people like us.
And I was actually at Adobe Max earlier this month, and they actually had this sneak peek session where they kind of introduced new technology, and the guy that actually invented the waveform was there. He was a presenter.
That's awesome.
And he actually presented new technology. They're trying to reinvent the waveform in a sense, and they're actually having it where it's color coded and you can actually transcribe audio right on the fly and everything like that.
Was it different than the spectrometer stuff that they've been adding?
Yes,
really?
It's actually something very new. I wish I had that video to show you. But you actually you can go to Adobe's website. I believe they have the link to the sneak peek session. But it was actually a giant leap forward as far as the typical waveform you see in audio editing. It was a very interesting thing, though. But yeah, the guy that actually invented the actual waveform that you see in every audio program that was actually there.
And what's amazing is that people who meet, there's a certain group of people that when they meet him, it's like meeting like Neil Armstrong. Yeah. And you can walk into another room and they're like, what's a waveform? So it's kind of cool that you can be that legendary and that nobody could care about you at all. The same person.
Oh yeah, he could walk into the next room and yeah, exactly. Yeah. So all right, let's take one more question and then we're going to take a little break in just a minute. What's the one piece of gear I should own for video besides my camera?
I will assume that they are including lenses. With the camera.
Yeah, let's go ahead and assume that they mean that. We'll go ahead and assume you have a lens on your camera as well, yeah.
No lens cap, we have a lens. What would be the number one thing? Well, I'll give you two answers so that I broaden out the answer. Number one, you'd have to have a way to capture audio if you're recording, people speaking. If you're just using it as B-roll and all you're doing is running around capturing images, one of my new favorite tools that I use all the time is I actually get a monopod with a fluid head, and I use that kind of as my tripod, as my stabilizing device, as my roaming device, because I can work anywhere from like a full stadium to a crowded floor in a concert. I can go anywhere, and I can get a little bit of motion. I can really lock it off if I want to. And it's just a really user-friendly thing, and they cost a couple $100, and it fits in my suitcase, so anywhere I travel, I'm not taking off the head of my tripod moving around. So those would be the two things, either audio or get a really good monopod with a fluid head, and you're gonna just set yourself free.
All right, let's talk about a new class. We over on KelbyOne, we got a new class. New classes you may or may not have heard about. Two new classes on Blackmagic Designs cameras. Our, John McQuiston covers both the pocket and production versions of Blackmagic's Game Changers. Also up this week, guides to the Nikon D5300 and the Canon 6D. You can find them all on KelbyOne.com. Now, right now, on Facebook and Twitter, we are asking our fans a question. Do you know Mylio? Everybody know Mylio? I'm waiting. Everybody respond. Raise your hand. Well, Mylio is the hottest new photo management software that photographers are raving about. This is for people who have large libraries of digital content that need to be organized, protected, and accessed at any given moment from any place in the world. For more information or to check out the product, visit Mylio.com. And that's, Mylio.com. I was about to read what it says. It says, spell out Malio for the viewers. Do I really need to spell out Malio?
Do it.
It is M-Y-L-I-O. Don't be mistaken for it being Milo. It's Mylio, MYLIO.com. There will be, they will be exhibiting at PhotoPlus Expo at their site, and their site is live right now. So go ahead and check that out. It's a great new product. They just launched it. Just launched today, right? Yes. Yeah, just launched today. So be sure to check that out. It's a fantastic new product they launched. So works. It's an iOS, Windows, and Mac OS. So it's a really cross-platform service there. All right. Also, we are giving away 10. What? No. We're giving away 10 full-year subscriptions to Malio this Friday. Wow, 10 full-year subscriptions. Wow.
That's a good deal.
Yes, on Facebook and Twitter.
That
Is it all for one person to have 10 of their own, or are you going to give
one
10
person
different
gets
people?
10 years? No.
That's pretty good.
So that's 10 people get a full year? Is that what that means?
5 on Facebook and 5 on Twitter.
So 5, we're giving away 5 on Facebook, 5 on Twitter. And you can find out more about that at facebook.com/KelbyOne online and Twitter at twitter.com/KelbyOne.
And it's pinned to the top, so they'll see it as soon as they go.
Yeah, it'll be pinned right at the top of that page, so be sure to check that out. Go do it right now. Well, just a minute when we go to break, but wait a minute. All right, we're going to take a couple more questions before we go to break. So let's look at here, because the questions are filling up here. We got a question. All right, here's an obvious one. Right, what we're talking about. What does Malio do? I just read what Malio does. It's essentially photo management. It's basically a way of accessing, managing, and securing your images and accessing them anywhere. You know, whether you're on a device, whether you're on your computer, anywhere. So it's really a great service. Be sure and go and check it out. Again, Mylio.com. All right. Do you use any sliders like Edelkrone?
Edelkrone, yes. I do. I actually have a couple sliders from Kessler. In terms of budget, they're not necessarily the cheapest. I've used Edelkrone before. I've used Cinovate before. It's one of those things where that comes down to your budget. It's almost like we should break up, here's maybe a recommendation, this price group, that price group, and this price group. Mm-hmm. But it's one of those things, if Glide Track, I bought that right away when I first started, and I hate it, so if anybody wants to buy mine, they can contact me. I'll give it to you for a song. But really what you're looking for is something that will give you a nice smooth movement. So I actually have some of the cheaper ones that I can use when shooting live, because I don't need any sort of motor or any sort of perfection for visual effects. So I have one that I can do for visual effects and for time-lapse, and then I have one that I'm just using for when I'm shooting. So the one I use the most often is my Kessler pocket slider.
All right. Going back to audio, what about mics? Do you have any recommendations on microphones?
Yes, I do. Again, these are broad questions, so I'm happy to give a couple answers, not because I'm indecisive. Rode makes a really cool lav that you can, it's called the Smart Lav, that you can use with your iPhone. So if you really want to get a good budget thing and not have to go through the whole rigmarole, you can pick that up and attach it to your either your current iPhone, which I don't like to do because you got to turn it into airplane mode because calls will preempt the recording, which is kind of weird. Or if you have an older version, you just put that in your case, and it's a free recording device that you can use. I have a couple Rode products for the camera top. I also have a Rode NTG3 that we were using in the class as our shotgun mic. And then I also use some Shure microphones. I have a set of their FP1 and FP5 wireless lavs. But just note that once you get into wireless, it's pretty expensive. I think they're between $600 to $800 per pair.
So
you want to commit to that. If you don't, you can actually go out and buy a wired lav and just run it to either your camera or your external recording device, and you can get that for under $100. So don't think that you have to do wireless. You can still do wireless. I mean, if they're walking around places, you can't. But if they're just sitting in a chair behind a desk like this, just run a cable on the floor and save yourself a couple $100. So.
Most definitely. All right, let's do this. Let's take another break. We will be right back. We're going to take some more questions, talk a little bit more, and got some giveaways a little bit later. So come right back with us here on The Grid.
Create a better website at squarespace.com. Start your free trial today.
MPix Pro, the full-service online photography lab, helping you grow your business with pro-quality photo products and stellar services. Get started at mpixpro.com.
All right, everyone, welcome back to The Grid. Now, before we get back into it, just want to talk to you about some new tours that are coming out from KelbyOne instructors are making their rounds across the states with our live seminars. Joe McNally, Matt Klaskowski, RC Concepcion, and Ben Wilmore all have upcoming stops in November. Check out all the upcoming tours at KelbyOne.com and click on the Live Events tab to find out more information. All right. Now, what I wanted to talk about, we had talked about earlier, is I thought would be interesting is talking about the state of DSLR filmmaking now and how you see it in the future. Where do you see it going now? Do you see it becoming, I mean, a lot of people say it might just be a fad, or is this really something that's here to stay and it's only going to get stronger? Are we going to see more people getting into this?
Well, a very poor analogy would be those people that said that TV was a fad and that it was going to go out of business. So, you know, now the 455 channels that we go through.
Some people probably said that about the internet too. Yeah.
That internet thing. So yeah, again, because it's technology, it's actually a good question to ask because you know there is a time and place. We don't do horse and buggy anymore. We don't do a lot of things that used to be around. But I always tell people, it's not always the gear. It's not always that thing. It's kind of more the process. So what DSLR filmmaking brought in is it brought creativity and access to a whole group of people that used to not have it. I mean, people can legitimately go out with two friends, a camera and a lens, and shoot a feature film that they can release in the theater. They can use Adobe products and edit it. I don't know if you guys remember the movie. I think it was called Monsters a couple years back.
I remember that, yeah.
And legitimately, the guy went out. He's like, I think he was dating a girl, and they got two actors that were dating, and the four of them traveled around South America, shot B-roll. Then they went in and he spent a year with After Effects and all this kind of creating this world, and then got someone to help him with the final character. And he did an entire movie that went off and made a couple $1 million, and it was legitimately, that was never possible before. I mean, even someone like Robert Rodriguez, who came out with El Mariachi for $7 grand with his, his movie was a larger scale than what these ones are. So it's kind of interesting. So when it comes to the cameras, a lot of people say, hey, they'll take these features from a DSLR camera, they'll put them into a traditional video camera, and then we'll just kind of forget this whole DSLR thing. And yes, kind of. What they're going to do is they're going to take the features from the DSLR camera, they will add those to the traditional video cameras, but traditional video cameras are always going to be larger, there's always going to have different feature sets, so it's still going to cater to a different group of people. So I don't foresee in the near future anything changing with DSLR cameras in terms of just continuing to expand and have a larger user base. So I can state this, a lot of people say, like early on when I first started playing with them, a lot of people said, well, will anybody take me seriously? Can this really be, can I go to a client and show up with this little camera and have them take me seriously? And when I went out to Hollywood and saw what they were doing, I'm like, yeah, you can. As long as it performs, nobody cares what happens behind the scenes. It only matters what you produce. And so I believe last year I read a statistic that in North America, over 50% of all commercials are now shot on a DSLR camera. So that's a pretty significant size.
That's a big move, yeah.
Of the market. So I don't think it's going anywhere but growth for this foreseeable future.
In Hollywood now, are there a lot of mainstream productions, I mean beyond commercials, about like TV shows and such, that are using DSLR?
I would guess to say that between, this is a guess, all the DPs I know and most of the people I know that work on shows, they have a DSLR camera in the toolkit. How often it works, it goes back and forth, but I would say that 50 to 75% have it as a tool available to them every day of every shoot. So it is definitely, I mean, it's just ubiquitous now. You can use them.
And like you say, I think it's just that much more accessible. Like you say, it's technology. Technology has made it more accessible. And so like when you mentioned Robert Rodriguez, and I also think of Kevin Smith.
Yes.
He's obviously basically almost sold his whole lifestyle.
Yeah.
To make Clerks.
Well, if you think Clerks, I mean, I think it was like $25,000, and I would say, if I had to guess, 98% of it went to film stock and processing.
Right.
So you take that away, he could have, for $3,500, bought a camera and shot the whole thing and saved himself, you know, $23,000 and made pretty much the same movie.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, if you're wanting to be a filmmaker, obviously, in these days, it's obviously a lot easier and more accessible than it ever was before. It's just, I remember I always dreamed of being a filmmaker, but it was like that barrier of entry was just,
it was too high.
So astronomical, it's just ridiculous now. So, and then you, and everybody dreams of getting their movies in theaters, and that's, of course, I even hear now it's difficult for even some of the most prominent filmmakers to even get there. I heard Spielberg had quite a time getting Lincoln to release in theaters.
Well, the problem is right now everything's gone to major releases. So what the studios do is the studios don't own the theaters anymore. So they have to basically make a pitch to date the theaters, and they say, we have this movie Captain America 3 coming out. And so the theaters are like, I want it. So they said, that's great. We also are releasing these 2 movies. So if you want Captain America, you have to take these 2, and I have to have a minimum of these number. So the studios that have really kind of bankable properties, they can eat up the available inventory. So then established filmmakers come in and say, hey, I got a great movie. And they're like, well, we'd love to show it, but I have a contractual agreement to get Captain America 3, so I've given up 4 of my theaters that would normally be open. So it's kind of this constant game of, you know, how do I get screens? But I think, again, it's kind of a dying, now I'm a film projected fan. I don't care if you capture on video. I think that movie theaters should stay projected on film.
I couldn't agree more, yeah.
So I'm a hybrid in that sense. But also, and I think that movies were meant to be seen with an audience, because that's, you know, if you go back to the great comedies of the 80s, I mean, watching Ghostbusters by yourself on your mobile phone at home just saddens me. It's just, there's something about it that's wrong. But I think what we're also seeing is, if you look at something like Gone with the Wind, I think is still the record holder for the most people have seen that movie than any other movie, and I don't know if it's like 100 million people, but you look online, and it's like people now you've never heard of within 2 years will have, you know, literally 1 billion views on stuff that they do. We are back in the days of the Wild West. I mean, what's going to happen next is kind of, we get to write it. So there's a certain amount of, you know, trepidation of like, where are we going to make money? How's it going to work? But also at the same point, if you do it right, you could be the next Bill Gates. I mean, there's enough, you know, content is still king. I was friends with the former CTO of Pixar, and they were kind of the envy of Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley always has been attracted to Hollywood, into the entertainment, that content. But there's never been really a marriage of technology and content until Pixar came along. They mastered the technology, but they also figured out how to find storytellers, and they married them, and it's been ridiculously successful. And I think that's what now is going to have to happen. You know, as all these different, you know, the Milios, all these things that come out of nowhere, someone's going to be looking, people still want stories. They still want stories to be told, because that's how humans have always passed down everything. Stories from generation to generation. And so just having flashy cameras and that, it's still going to come down to storytelling, and it's kind of a fun place to be.
I think you're right. I mean, as impressive as the technology has become, you know, story and content is very much king, you know. So, all right, let's take a few more questions here. So Tom asks, if shooting sports, would a photographer be better off capturing video and pulling stills from the video?
No. How's that for an answer? I will be definitive on that.
Pretty straightforward, yes.
So I'll give you some of the technology behind why. So when you're shooting stills, you're shooting usually at a higher shutter speed, because what you want to do is you want to freeze all the action and make it look nice. You might want bokeh behind it, so you don't always want everything in focus, but you do want everything sharp. When it comes to video, if you go back to, again, the birth of films, because that's where we got our visual language from, they decided, you know, way before we were around, that 24 frames per second, when projected, gave us the equivalent of motion. But the problem is if we see everything sharp projected at 24, it deceives us, because in real life we have natural motion blur. So they found the happy medium, a 180-degree shutter on old film cameras, mimicked kind of the motion blur. So if you actually stop the video and look at it, every frame of the video looks soft when you pause, but then you play and it looks really sharp. It's because our minds are playing a trick on us. So if you shoot video and you want to pull a still, the still is going to have some motion blur that you can't get rid of in Photoshop. So you could go ahead and shoot with a higher shutter speed, and then you could be able to pull the stills, but now it's going to look really weird. So I'll give him a workaround. Sports is one of the few areas where you can actually shoot with a high shutter speed, because people want that intense, the speed, the action, the impact. So that's one place where you can actually shoot with a higher shutter speed in video and still be able to pull a still. So he's on the border, but I don't want to mislead people thinking that they can just shoot video and pull stills, because inherently it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So yeah, like you say, there's that part of our brain plays a part in how we perceive.
Yeah, the lizard brain we don't get to modify just because it would be easier.
Unfortunately, no.
No.
So let's go. Here's a question. There's no name. It just says, here's a question.
All right, we'll take it.
Do I have the ability in Photoshop to take all the recorded sound out and replace it with something else? I do it in iMovie or Final Cut, but can I do it in Photoshop too? I would almost say no on that one.
I can't fully answer the question. I know that I will bring in my video clips and add sound effects and music, and I'll put in a voiceover. I don't know if I can physically unlink and delete audio that's there. I can't imagine that you can't.
I don't think. I've played around with video in Photoshop, and I know you can bring video clips in and play audio. You can actually bring in separate audio clips, but you can't detach your audio from your video.
But can you mute that track then? Could you just basically?
You can mute the track, yes, but you can't separate the audio from the video track.
So I think you could cheat it, but if you actually want to unlink it and delete it, that I don't know. But you definitely can turn it off and build extra audio in Photoshop the way you would in iMovie or Final Cut.
Right. All right. Monopod or Steadicam? Your first choice.
Well, monopod because of the fact that can work on pretty much every production I'm on. Steadicam is its own beast, where when you need it, there is no tool better. But it's not something that plays on every single production. If you're shooting, live events or sports, there are dedicated people who they just run one all the time. I went and opened a stadium down in Texas, and I had a Steadicam rig on all day. That's good for those. There are certain movies where you need certain shots that are that way, but it's not a tool that you're just going to put the camera on and shoot with it every time you go out. So the monopod is going to work more. I prefer the look of the Steadicam, but if he just asks which one I have to choose first, I'd choose the one that works more often.
All right, let's take one more question because this absolutely pertains to Halloween. When shooting with a DSLR, how do you control the brightness when shooting fireworks?
You don't. So what you need to do for that is you would actually kind of figure out your happy medium. This is one of the problems with DSLR cameras. The ones that don't have a high dynamic range, when it's going from that really dark sky to suddenly, the explosion goes off and gets really bright, it's not very appealing. So if you can find a camera that gives you more of that latitude or create a picture style that flattens out the image, that will help you. But what I do is I kind of find if you have a range that this is dark, this is the brightest, I don't go in the middle, I go kind of a little bit above the middle and I expose for that. So when it gets really dark, it's fine. But when it goes kind of really big, I don't lose all that detail. It doesn't just go completely white. I'll get some of the blues and the oranges in the explosion. So that would be my recommendation.
All right. Okay, so I just wanted to throw one last thing in. Monopod with or without feet, really?
Yeah, well, you've seen those, right?
Yes.
So this is my cautionary tale. I love people. I wouldn't necessarily say I love humanity, but I'm always impressed at the stupidity of humans. So I've been around several people who bought the feedy monopods, and they show me this neat trick where it will stand up on its own with the camera and lens, and they go, look, and I'm like, that's great, but you do realize it's going to fall over, and then I get a call 3 weeks later, and I'm like, yeah, I busted my lens because it fell over. So if you get feet, know that it helps you with stability, but don't think it's a tripod and walk away from it, ever. And if you do, you can call me, and I will tell you that you're an idiot because I love you, and I will help make you a better person. So that would be my thoughts on feedy monopods.
Wow. All right. So before we wrap things up, I just want to, where would you suggest if, let's say somebody wants to get started with DSLR filming, apart from checking out your book, of course, right here, how would somebody want to go ahead and get started if they wanted to get into this?
I think there's a couple places. My standard response is that there is no better education than picking up your camera and going out and shooting.
Absolutely.
I mean, people too often, they read too many books, they talk to too many people, they watch too many tutorials online, and they try to become educated by thinking. And really the best, I try to tell my kids this, that I encourage failure. Because you learn from failing.
Absolutely.
So the first time you take your camera out, you shoot something, you bring it back, and you hate what you did, you will be bound and determined to look up the answers to why you didn't like it.
Absolutely.
And then you're actually in the zone where you need to be. So I would say the first thing you should do, just go, if you can get to the point where you can turn on the camera, activate your video and shoot, go shoot something. And don't go out in the backyard, don't record a cat in your living room, don't record the brick wall of the back of the house, go shoot something. Go down to the local park where they're playing a baseball game, go to a play, go do something where you actually have to attempt to capture something in a way that someone would, because then you get in those borderline areas where you're like, oh, so I can't do that with this camera. And then don't get frustrated, go, well, how can I get around it?
Right.
Because that's part of the fun of working with these cameras is you have to be better than the gear. Because I always tell people, you know, if you want to get hired, be the person that can think outside of what other people are doing, because then you can do amazing things.
Right.
Because really, it's just the limits of your mind.
Right.
The tools are there now. So
Absolutely.
I don't know if that answered the question, though.
I know. I think, I wanted to touch on something we talked about earlier. Is it's like limiting your resources. You know, it forces creativity.
Yeah.
I mean, you were talking about that earlier, and I think I always talk about that in my own work. Is just like limit your resources. It forces you to think a little bit outside the box, like you're thinking.
Yeah.
It forces you to think creatively, like you're saying. Go out there and solve your own problems. When you go out there and shoot and do your, you're discovering what's not working. And
Yes.
you ask yourself, well, why isn't this working? Figure out how it's not working. Then if you can't figure it out, go find someone or find a resource that will tell you why it's not working, and then go and then try it again. So I think a lot of people, they just want that quick answer. They want that trick.
Yep.
And I don't think it seems like people just don't want to work and figure those problems out anymore.
It doesn't seem like that?
I mean,
You're kind.
Granted, there are tremendous amount of training resources ever than there was 20 years ago, especially, with video, of course, and of course the technology is better than it was. But that still doesn't mean you're going to, sit there at your computer, take a training course, and all of a sudden you're an expert.
Correct.
You've got to get out there and really do it, get your hands dirty, so to speak, and really get in there and make it happen. All right. We have some giveaways to do, of course. So we are, like I was mentioned earlier, going to give away Barry's book here, the DSLR Filmmaker's Handbook, and you'll, of course, sign it for us, won't you?
I would be happy to do so.
Put it right there so you can get a close-up on it. There it is right there. So we'll be giving that away, and of course we have...
If people haven't ever written a book before, I will tell them that this represents 1 year of your life. Oh. So if anybody wants to know, this is what 1 year of your life looks like. So if you're impressed,
that right here.
There we go. There we go.
There's a year of my life right there. Yeah, there we go, right there. All right, so I have a copy of my book as well. We're gonna give away right here. There you go. Show that right there. And I did mention we're going to go ahead and give away a copy of Jay's book as well, right there, The Light, Gesture, and Color. This is a phenomenal book. You might not get to get this one because I'm going to keep this one here. But how do you win these books? You're going to go to KelbyOne.com/contests. You're going to go near to the menu, select the grid, enter your name, your email, and you're going to enter which book you would like to win. Now, just entering your name enters your chance to win the book, but we want you to tell us which book you would like to win, or should you get picked, which one you would like to receive. Now, mention our blogs. No, I know what that said. I'm just joking. All right. So where can you find out more about us? Well, I am... we're talking about our blogs or KelbyOne blogs? I am...
You're in charge. Go for
I
it.
am at CoreySBarker.com. I'm also at Facebook.com/CoreyPS3D, as well as Twitter at CoreyPS3D. And you can be located at?
I am at BarryAnderson.com. On Instagram, it's just Barry Andersson. Just note that my last name is 2 S's, not 1. And if you follow me on Twitter, it's actually MoPho, MOPHO_Barry. It's actually for motion photography. I think that's what we talked about. Is there other social media I missed?
That is it. All right. Well, we want to thank you guys for joining us on the grid. Sorry that the usual guys are not here. They are, of course, at PhotoPlus. And as I mentioned earlier, if you are at PhotoPlus this week, be sure to check them out at the KelbyOne booth. They're all going to be teaching there at the KelbyOne booth, so be sure to check that out. Now, I want to thank you, Barry, for joining us on the show today. And
thank you for having me.
Be sure to look forward to Barry's courses. They're going to be coming up on KelbyOne in the not-too-distant future. And you have the titles on those courses yet? Or?
I believe it's I don't know what the final ones are. It was capturing production audio and audio sweetening in post.
Absolutely. All right, good deal. So, I want to thank you guys for joining us here on The Grid this week. We will be back next week, and we will find out who's going to be hosting next week, so be sure to tune in for that. So, we'll see you guys next time here on The Grid.